Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and there was a great discussion online between two great intellects, Glenn Lowry, who's an economics professor at Brown University, and John McWhorter, who's a linguistics professor at Columbia University. Both are black gentlemen and conservative, and they took up the issue of the sorts of discussions that are enveloping the nation at present. Glenn Lowry offering commentary on one of the more absurd things being advanced by the identitarians, and this is a strain of identitarians that are orthodox, and they discuss this too. Those, getting more specific, those who see anti-racism as their religion.
The huge thing here is whether or not the loss of Mr. Floyd's life was is properly taken as being indicative of white supremacist domination of black bodies. It amazes me that we even speak such sentences.
It is rather amazing, but anti-racism as the orthodox iteration of identitarianism. It's a really interesting discussion they had, about an hour long. And John McWhorter, in the back and forth, also sort of raised the prospect that led to a larger discussion about how do you even address these individuals? Do you ignore them? Do you try to reason with them? Even when it's more likely than not, based on what we've seen, that reason will fail? John McWhorter.
How do you get this form of a message out there? I'm wondering whether I should counsel people to face this mob down. Do you turn around and not talk to these people because it's like talking to a character out of the Crucible and they simply can't listen? Or do you shout these people down and make them feel on the defensive? How do you try to push mobbish, unempirical, self-focused ideology in the name of progressivism out of the room? How do you get rid of it? Do you just wait for the fashion to change? And I'm sure that there's a science to this. People have thought about this, and I'm going to do some thoughting about it. But what do you do other than complain? I don't want to write a book where I say, fuck all these people. There has to be a reason for the book.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Rich Lowry. He's the editor of National Review, Fox News contributor, and author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what about McWhorter's question? I don't want to just write a book about it. There has to be a reason. There's a point to it. Why even waste my time? How do you address some of the arguments, to the extent the arguments, it's really lines being recited by those rationalizing violence and otherwise kneeling at the altar of anti-racism?
Well, first, we should point out that there's just zero evidence of systematic police racism. I believe that's a lie. There's not an epidemic of the police shootings of unarmed black men. Everyone's pointed out that the Washington Post database of these shootings, I think there were 9 last year. There were 19 or something shootings of white men. So this isn't an epidemic. I do think the best studies show that there's not a racial disparity in the use of lethal force, but there is something of a racial disparity further down the ladder of force. And there seems to be indications that police are more aggressive with African-American suspects. And we've heard that, from people that we know and trust and are friends. Tim Scott talked about this a lot. We have a piece on our website from a guy named Theodore Johnson, African-American gentleman who says he's been stopped 40 times, by cops in his car. I think I've been stopped twice, my whole life. So I think that's something we have to be cognizant of. But that's not a reason to fund the police. It's not a reason to lie about the police. It's not a reason to justify violence. And one of the more disturbing trends, and there have been a lot over the last 2 or 3 weeks, is serious intellectuals, David Remnick, Hannah Jones, Nicole Jones. I don't know how serious she is, but she's won a Pulitzer Prize, the architect of the 1619 Project. And others have said violence is justified, that destruction of property is not violence, that it just pops right back up if you destroy a store And this just isn't true. This kind of unrest scars cities potentially for decades. And it doesn't hurt the people in the gated communities. You know, they're safe and secure and prosperous regardless. They have the means to leave if they don't want to be in an urban area anymore. It hurts the poorest communities. So we just have to be absolutely adamant on this. But the frightening thing is just the cultural power of the other side, the fact that corporate America is on the other side, all elite institutions are on the other side, and we're having these cancelings, not just of, you know, prominent people who may have said something that's completely radioactive and unacceptable. We're having cancelings over, you know, just dubious or controversial statements that don't speak to an evil heart, and cancellations of people who aren't famous. You know, the deputy director of something or other in a Kansas City company. So this is a frightening phenomenon, and it does bear some resemblance to the Cultural Revolution in China. Obviously, you know, 2 million people aren't going to die, but the fervor of it bears some resemblance to that.
And what do you make of the new sign that says, you know, white silence is violence?
I mean, it's absurd.
Like they shame you for not
yeah.
being out there protesting with them. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it's deeply illiberal. Some people have other things to do with their lives, and some people have legitimate disagreements with you. And this is a view that politics should totally dominate everything we do, everything we say, everything we think, and that there's only one way to think. And that's dangerous and un-American.
Well, here's the thing, too. I'm glad you used the word frightening, because I think sometimes there's no reason to overstate the case. We're just describing what's happening and the implications, trying to understand the road we're on and maybe how far down that road we are. And I'm not just talking about, you know, the targeting of Paw Patrol by Black Lives Matter, but that's also being targeted, or the disarming Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam as Looney Tunes goes full loony. Dan Henninger writing in the Wall Street Journal, free speech isn't dead in the United States, but it looks like more than ever it requires active defense. What Andrew Sullivan predicted 2 years ago in a piece in New York Magazine, which he's no longer allowed to write for at present, that we all live on a college campus now. That's playing out in real time in every sector of our society, and almost all of which, the civic institutions and the public sector institutions, are controlled by identitarian leftists, with the exception of the Oval Office and the Senate. And so, I mean, you have a lot of raw materials there for the left to do a lot of things that you may have thought 2 weeks ago or 3 months ago were unthinkable.
No, I mean, everything we've mocked about Oberlin College for years now is ascendant or becoming ascendant in our culture. Oberlin College has won. You know, the diversity officer at Oberlin College, who we all thought he or she was completely nuts, is now a dominant cultural presence. And, you know, the thing we have is the common sense and decency of most of the American people still. So we have to go out to win elections. And, you know, that's why I've been disturbed the way the president's handled this. You know, there has to be some give. You know, we should look at police practices. We should look at union rules around policing. And I think the president, with some of his lunatic tweets and not doing any kind of defensive politics around this, has really hurt himself. You know, there's no reason that he should have a 30% approval rating on this issue. You know, he hasn't done anything to make these riots happen. He doesn't run the Minneapolis police force or any police force in the country, but he's getting blamed for it, and that's entirely just what he said and what he's done. So, you know, the stakes are huge in November, and you know, electing office holders is one of the main means of power we have left to us. And if Democrats sweep, you know, Washington, it's going to be a world of hurt.
Well, President Trump did have a roundtable with police officers to talk about, you know, reforming police and the relationship between officers and the citizens, but that didn't make any national news. No one even discussed it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And there's also a statement, I think it was last weekend, everything runs together. I think it was a Saturday. I think it might have been down when he was down at Cape Canaveral for the rocket launch. He made a statement about the George Floyd case that was great. It was perfect. And it was entirely ignored. But he and his team have to be aware that that's the dynamic. So you have to go out of your way to make sure you're doing it in a high-profile enough manner that it's impossible to ignore. So obviously, that's an obstacle in his way is the media bias and the media narrative. But there's not as though he doesn't have means at his disposal to go over their heads, and he has on other things.
And the message discipline to stick to advancing a particular message, particularly in times where you're, times that are particularly divisive and highly charged, and message discipline is not necessarily his strong suit.
No.
Rich Lowry, editor of National Review, Fox News contributor, author of The Case for Nationalism, How It Made Us Powerful, United, and Free. Rich, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much. Take care, guys.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
It may not be stomach issues.
For me, it's intense gas, or pain, or diarrhea, sometimes all at once, over and over.
I spent years with the symptoms but could never figure it out.
No matter what I did, they never went away. So I decided to break it down for my doctor and get really specific about my symptoms.
We discovered that exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, may be the reason for my stomach issues.
EPI is caused by my pancreas. It leads to diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools. The symptoms just don't go away.
But EPI can show up with even one symptom.
The good news? EPI is manageable.
But to get to the right diagnosis, you have to break it down for your doctor and get specific about the severity of your symptoms.
Visit identifyepi.com to learn more and use the symptom checker to help change the conversation with your doctor. Brought to you by AbbVie.
Hey, has online learning been a struggle for your child? Perhaps a change is needed. Please consider St. John's Northwestern Academies. As an independent co-ed college prep school for grades 7 to 11, St. John's Northwestern has specialized in individualized college preparatory education for, get this, 136 years. Students learn inside and outside the classroom with small class sizes and personalized instruction in a safe, secure environment. And starting this fall, students can choose from the New Leadership Academy or their acclaimed Military Academy program. Whichever program a student chooses